Up next, the Philadelphia Eagles are on the clock. On the clock now, the Los Angeles Rams. The Minnesota Vikings, now on the clock. It's the New Orleans Saints, now on the clock. On the clock now, the Kansas City Chiefs. The Miami Dolphins, now on the clock. Now the Seattle Seahawks are on the clock. On the clock now, it's the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. It's the Atlanta Falcons, now on the clock. With the next selection, the Browns are on the clock. On the clock now, the Dallas Cowboys. Next up, the Cincinnati Bengals are on the clock. The Washington Commanders are now on the clock. It's the Bills, now on the clock. On the clock now, it's the Green Bay Packers. Now on the clock, it's the Las Vegas Raiders. The San Francisco 49ers are now on the clock. The Carolina Panthers now on the clock. The Baltimore Ravens now on the clock. The New England Patriots are now on the clock. With the next selection, the Lions are on the clock. On the clock now, the Chicago Bears. On the clock now, it's the Denver Broncos. It's the Steelers now on the clock. The New York Giants are now on the clock. The Arizona Cardinals are now on the clock. The Cardinals on the clock now. With the next selection, the New York Jets. On the clock now, the Detroit Lions. On the clock now, the Jacksonville Jaguars. The Minnesota Vikings are now on the clock. Now on the clock, the Rams. The New York Jets are now on the clock. Next up, it's the Seahawks on the clock. With the next pick, the Kansas City Chiefs are now on the clock. On the clock now, it's the Miami Dolphins. On the clock now, the Seattle Seahawks. The Atlanta Falcons are now on the clock. The Cleveland Browns are now on the clock. It's the Cowboys now on the clock. With the next selection, the Cincinnati Bengals are on the clock. Next up, the Commanders are on the clock. The Buffalo Bills are now on the clock. On the clock now, it's the Los Angeles Chargers. The Las Vegas Raiders now on the clock. It's the Tennessee Titans now on the clock. The 49ers on the clock now. With the next pick, the Miami Dolphins are on the clock. And now on the clock, the Minnesota Vikings. On the clock now, the New England Patriots. Now we turn to the Eagles. They're on the clock. The Chicago Bears are on the clock now. With the next pick, the Jacksonville Jaguars are on the clock. With the next selection, it's the Pittsburgh Steelers. And now on the clock, it's the 49ers. The Houston Texans are now on the clock. It's now the Arizona Cardinals selection. They're on the clock. It's now the Vikings' turn. On the clock. The Jaguars are on the clock. The Chicago Bears are now on the clock. The Los Angeles Rams now on the clock. Now on the clock, the Los Angeles Chargers. Next up, the Jets are on the clock. The Chiefs are on the clock. Next up, it's the Broncos on the clock. The Seattle Seahawks are now on the clock. On the clock now, it's the Atlanta Falcons. On the clock now, the Houston Texans. The Bengals now on the clock. With the next selection, it's the Washington Commanders. The Colts now on the clock.